Welcome to the Data Room, where we share best practices and actionable tips on being a data-driven company, or as we call it, data first. If you're a B2B revenue leader looking to scale your growth stage business, come and join experienced CEO and tech founder Scott Stouffer in the Data Room. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Data Room. We are here with another episode with scaleMatters CEO and co-founder Scott Stouffer. Today we are going to take you all on a journey to discuss the different stages of building your startup, as well as discuss the benefits of including revenue operations as you grow and why that's important. Scott, I know we've had multiple conversations talking about your experience. You've obviously worked with a number of early stage businesses. You've overseen your own companies as CEO. Can you share your own experience and knowledge about the odds at the beginning that startups face to get past that initial seed stage?
Sure. So when we talk about company stage, we're often equating that to financing stages. And as you get further along in financing stages, like, for example, Series C, Series D, the companies are more valuable, and that's because the risk associated with the investment is dramatically reduced the further along a company is on the journey. So clearly a company is riskiest from an investment perspective when it's first getting started, which is what we would typically consider seed stage. For companies that have secured some type of seed financing, probably only about 1 in 7 advance to be able to raise a Series A financing. And not that the Series A financing is really the goal, but it tends to be indicative of a company getting far enough along with product market message fit that it makes sense to begin investing and scaling out a go-to-market motion. The companies that do achieve Series A financing, for those companies, the odds of them getting to a Series B are only 30%. So it's certainly better than the odds from getting from seed to Series A, but it still isn't terribly uplifting. And those Series A companies that get to Series B have typically been able to achieve some sort of repeatable go-to-market motion that isn't founder-led. And what Series B investors are betting on is that if they throw more money at it, that they can actually scale it much faster. So by the time you get to Series B, most questions of product market message fit are well behind us. We've got some type of effective motion for acquiring customers. Early retention data looks promising, and it's only a matter of how fast can we go. So obviously at that point, the risks have decreased materially, if you will, from the seed stage. And typically we would see probably half of Series B companies manage to go ahead and evolve to get a Series C financing or equivalent. So if you do the math, the odds aren't great. Only 1 out of 44 seed-funded companies actually progresses to a Series C stage, which is ultimately marked by scalable, repeatable customer acquisition as well as attractive retention rates.
Yikes, those are not great odds. I think that's what we'll spend the majority of time talking about, how to kind of defeat these odds that you're facing, because clearly getting to 1 out of 44 is not a long or a home run as it will be. So let's talk about some of the challenges that kind of make those odds possible. You touched on it a little bit about like product market message fit. That's the first kind of significant initial hurdle to overcome when you're a startup. And we've touched on it a little bit in past episodes about why product market message fit is clearly important. You want to find the ideal market for your product or service. You want your messaging to resonate. What are your recommendations for B2B companies that are trying to find a way to nail that product market message fit?
Well, the fastest way to achieve product market message fit is really to accelerate the number of at-bats you're getting with prospective customers, and then make sure each of those at-bats is actually instructive to help you converge, if you will, on a solid product market message fit. So let's maybe first talk about how many at-bats do you need. And again, I'm using at-bats as the metaphor to say how many initial conversations do you need to have with prospective customers. Let's say a reasonable indicator that you have fit is when you can secure, 1 to 2 customers out of every 10 prospects you speak with, at least provided those prospects reasonably match what you think your ideal customer profile is. And let's say for B2B companies, 10 happy customers is a good early measure of fit. So typically, when you're talking about getting a Series A financing, you probably need to have at least 10 customers already behind you that are happy and that show that you're providing value. So that means once your messaging is working okay, you'll actually need to speak with 50 to 100 prospects in order to generate those 10 customers. And since it's going to take you some number of iterations and at-bats just to get your messaging and your product tuned to this level, realistically, you probably need to figure on speaking to 150 to 200 prospects before you can actually have evidence of product market message fit. So that's, it's a decent pool of people you need to talk to. So let's talk for a second about how to accelerate that. Many early stage companies actually dramatically miss the mark here because they're so worried about they don't want to spend money because they don't have a lot of money to spend. So they often try to rely on SEO, right? Organic visitors coming into the website, right, to produce these prospects. They launch the website, perhaps they write a couple of blog articles, and then they wonder why nothing is happening. And the reason nothing is happening is because it takes a ton of good content and a long time to ever rank high enough on these search algorithms that someone will actually find you. So the next thing companies will often try when they really aren't getting enough at-bats organically is they'll spend some money on search ads. And this often isn't terribly helpful because it usually brings in a bunch of garbage visitors to your website that never convert into a conversation that you could actually learn something from. So our view is that the best way to quickly get at-bats so that you can tune your messaging, tune your product, et cetera, beyond obviously just leveraging the network of the founders, is to invest aggressively in outbound prospecting via phone, email, and LinkedIn in the case of B2B. It may take a while to turn any of the prospecting activities into actual sales opportunities, but as long as you're getting some kind of engagement, you're able to use the feedback from those engagements and tune your approach faster. And as we've mentioned many times before, you want to make sure you have some kind of conversation intelligence or call recording tool in place so that you can capture any of these conversations that do occur, and then you can go back and study them to help inform your next iteration on product market message fit. So I think the key thing is to get product market message fit quickly, you got to have more at-bats. To get those at-bats, you really have to pick up the phone and prospect. You can't reliably count on lower-cost mechanisms to get people in front of you.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think your last point is a great tip. You use technology and implement technology to help accelerate and standardize that learning process, or else you're really going to be spending a lot of time trying to nail this product market message fit when technology could have helped standardize and accelerate that process a little bit more. And
yeah, for sure.
As that startup grows, they start to gain traction, gain some customers, figure out their product market message fit. Then they're tasked with the task of trying to create a replicable success that they found with their first customers. So when you hear us talk about a go-to-market engine, that's what we're talking about, creating a repeatable and a scalable process for you to acquire new customers. And I think once you get to that stage, Scott, what are your recommendations for how to start building that engine, how to start building that go-to-market strategy?
Sure. So when we're talking about kind of beginning to build an effective go-to-market engine, we're usually talking about this point. It's a transitional point for companies when a company needs to evolve beyond what we call founder-led customer acquisition. And we call it that because most, if not all, of the early customers typically come from leveraging the network of the founders. The beginning stage of building an effective go-to-market engine is really to establish some kind of repeatable motion to acquire customers that isn't dependent on the founders. So by definition, something that is repeatable means it can be modeled, which then starts to lead to it being predictable. So once companies find a few repeatable approaches, so maybe, as I mentioned, outbound prospecting might be a repeatable approach that you can use, and you can figure out, okay, we can generate 10 introductory meetings per SDR each month. That translates into 3 opportunities and 1 deal, right? So you start to be able to model these things and then say, okay, so let's add another SDR, should double our growth, et cetera. Or similarly with ads, paid ads, or any of the different strategies you might try. Once companies do find a few repeatable approaches to acquiring customers, they're going to need to turn their attention to figuring out which of those are most scalable. So scalability is really a measure of how well revenue growth is correlated to investment growth. So say, for example, that a company doubles its go-to-market spend, and as a result, it triples the number of customers and revenue that they're getting. A company like that is far more scalable than a company that doubles their spend but only increases their revenue by 50%. And so what you see, particularly in these Series C, Series D type raises, the companies that are raising these large later stage rounds of financing, they've typically proven some amount of scalability, meaning that they can actually put additional cash to work. So investors are really thrilled to invest in these organizations because they believe they can drive much faster growth with more cash. At some point in a company's evolution, growth will most certainly begin to slow. And when that happens, it becomes really hard to raise money to continue to fund losses. So a company's strategic priority shifts from growth to profitability, since being profitable is really the only sure bet to long-term survival. And so at that point, efficiency of the go-to-market engine becomes paramount. So we've sort of talked about different characteristics. First is repeatability and predictability, then scalability, then efficiency. All of these things are important attributes to get in terms of an effective go-to-market engine. Our view is that early in the journey to build such an effective engine, companies really need to prioritize speed, and they need to invest in strategies which source prospects that should have the shortest time to results. So similar to when you're trying to optimize for product market message fit, the faster you can get at bats, the faster you can optimize your go-to-market engine. Again, we like outbound prospecting. We also like paid digital ads as 2 strategies in B2B that work quickest in order to produce at-bats. And for certain industries, an events strategy could also produce legitimate prospects in a relatively short time. At the same time, you're going to want to make reasonable investments in content, not necessarily with an expectation that you're going to drive inbound organic leads real quickly, but more because good content provides what I'll call brand air cover, which allows the prospecting and the paid ad strategies to be more effective. For companies with a relatively narrow and defined set of companies in their ICP or target customers in their ICP, this is where what we call account-based strategies, you've heard of account-based marketing, account-based strategies, et cetera. This is where they come into play, because they're very effective to help orchestrate the investments in content, ads, and prospecting all around a concentrated set of target customers. So I think what's important is foundational to all of these steps along the evolution of go-to-market, of building the go-to-market engine, is the ability to accurately measure the inputs, measure the outputs, and measure everything in between, so that the leadership team has the data and the insights in order to inform the successive iterations to a more optimized state.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the reason why this is called the data room, right? Having enough data and actually getting out there and having those conversations, having those at bats, and then putting together these strategies that are capturing data adequately through your tech stack. All of those things are important so that you can get to that optimized state a lot more quicker than just guessing along the way. And I think what's implicit in that last point, Scott, is again, using that, your technology tools and integrating the right technology tools is important, along with having someone to own that strategy for operationalizing your processes. That's where I believe, RevOps can really come and provide value across the board for many different functions in the team, not just the operational stuff that we may think of when we think of RevOps. And I would love to hear your thoughts on any other kind of tangible benefits that B2B companies can take away with this conversation. How can growing companies use revenue operations as this proactive part of their go-to-market strategy?
Well, RevOps has basically become Jax or better if you want to build an effective go-to-market engine. I mean, you think of it as a three-legged stool, particularly focused on acquisition, sales, marketing, and RevOps. And without any one of those three, it's going to break. One of the reasons for that is that so much of the buyer journey has become arm's length through digital venues. And to compete, you'll need both the ability to automate maximizing your presence on these venues, but also measuring prospect response and prospect engagement so that you can further optimize your presence. It's not just top of funnel, however, stuff. The sales motion has also become very dependent on leveraging technology such as the CRM, a cadence tool, a conversation intelligence tool. And if you aren't leveraging these appropriate technologies, then you really aren't providing your go-to-market teams with the modern tools necessary to compete effectively. The issue, though, is these tools are complex and they're sophisticated technology. So it's not simply good enough to buy them. Like any sophisticated IT stuff, you actually need to have experts that are available to you either in-house or through a service provider that can actually architect them, configure them, maintain the go-to-market tech portfolio so that it actually is an asset instead of what so often becomes a confusing liability to the team since stuff isn't set up properly, and then people struggle on how do they move opportunities and move leads, et cetera, through the overall process. This is where so many early stage companies miss the boat, particularly Series A and Series B stage companies. They've raised enough money that they can afford to outfit their go-to-market team with the modern tools to be successful. But in many cases, the leadership team's not experienced enough to understand how difficult it is to put all this stuff together correctly. So they underinvest in the necessary expertise, i.e. RevOps, to make this work. Then a year or two later, after the sales and marketing leaders have failed miserably at kind of properly assembling the go-to-market tech and data infrastructure, their staffs are frustrated because it's too difficult to navigate through all the tools, and the C-level leadership is frustrated because it requires almost unnatural acts to pull any useful data in order to inform the leadership team so they can keep optimizing. And we've seen this video play out time and again, and yet it's such an easy thing to solve for. Our view is before you start making any material investments in go-to-market tech, make sure you have a strategic partner with real expertise at this stuff. That partner can be somebody in-house, right? Hire a very senior level RevOps person who's been there, done that time and again, understands how to make all this stuff hum, or hire a service provider. But in either case, you really need to have that expertise on board prior to building out the go-to-market tech and data infrastructure. Otherwise, you're going to be hiring them a year or two later, and their primary job at that point is going to be to clean up the mess. And not only does that turn out to be much more costly, perhaps more importantly, it also means that you've lost this incredibly valuable time in market when your go-to-market engine could have been far more effective. So that's our view. Is RevOps isn't a nice to have. It's jacks are better, fundamental if you're going to have a good go-to-market engine and get there in a timely fashion.
Yeah, and as we can tell, like time is value, especially in these early stages. But even when you're trying to grow a repeatable and scalable go-to-market engine, RevOps and being able to take that expertise and accelerate your go-to-market engine is really critical. And I think if you are kind of a B2B CEO, or if you're part of a senior leadership team, if you're listening to this and you're growing your company, take these tips to heart. This is about building the foundation so you don't have to, as Scott mentioned, clean up the mess later on, right? And if you are kind of in the weeds of building and trying to figure out what exactly to do, and you want an experienced perspective on how you're building your RevOps team and how you're building your processes and your tech stack and your data infrastructure, please check out scalematters.com/assessment. We have just launched an easy do-it-yourself assessment of your current processes. So you fill out a few questions, and you'll actually get a in-depth list of tailored recommendations from our team that you can keep in mind and use as you grow. So scalematters.com/assessment. Scott, this is valuable as always, and I really appreciate your insight as a CEO and a founder and working with all these growing B2B companies.
Awesome. Thanks, Heather.
Thanks. Talk to you later.
Bye now.